In today's video, we'll continue on with our NHL GM report cards, reviewing the offseason activity of all the NHL general managers. We continue our way through the Atlantic Division today, and we look at the Ottawa Senators and new GM Steve Staios. We'll take a look at the trades, the signings, and grade his work coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned today, we continue on our NHL GM report card series, working our way through the Atlantic Division first, starting today with the Ottawa Senators. Of course, we've already covered the Bruins, the Sabres, the Canadiens, and the Red Wings. Now we're on to Ottawa. Of course, next up we'll have the Leafs and the two teams from Florida. Of course, we get GM Steve Staios in his first full offseason. Of course, he just became GM of the Sens early this season. Of course, he was originally named President of Hockey Operations when Pierre Dorion was still there. Ended up taking over the GM role after they parted ways with Pierre. So, of course, like I said, we're going to take a look at the trades, the signings, internal signings, UFA signings, kind of analyze how that's affected the team, and then end up grading the work of Steve Staios here. So I'll do a summary at the end as well of players in, players out, and is the team better or where do they stand? So they actually have made a lot of trades. Staios has been very busy. He's actually made 6 trades since the season has ended. Out of the 6 of them, you could argue at least 3, were fairly substantial for the franchise, whereas another 3 are more impacting prospects. So the big trade, of course, came ahead of the draft involving the Boston Bruins, where they traded and acquired for Linus Ullmark from Boston, which was the team's by far their biggest acquisition. Of course, he comes with 1 year on his contract at $5 million. Recent Vezina Trophy winning goalie. We knew the Bruins were likely going to be breaking up the Ullmark-Swayman tandem. Unfortunately, there won't be any more goalie hugs, but as fun as that was to watch, you knew from a business perspective that Ullmark was likely going to be on the move. I'm a little bit surprised that the Bruins don't have Swayman signed as of yet. But going back to the Boston Bruins was Joonas Korpisalo with 25% retained. I mean, he still has 4 years on his contract. I mean, the fact that he was able to turn Korpisalo, even with some retained money, into Ullmark, regardless of what else was included here, that's amazing work. I was shocked because there was early reports that these two teams had talked for quite some time before they, finalized the deal, and that there was original talk saying that the Bruins didn't want Korpisalo. And eventually they warmed up to the idea. So they also got Mark Kastelik, who's a pretty good bottom 6 forward. The problem with Kastelik, I guess, is the consistency. Big guy, always was right at the top in training camp with their cardio and fitness testing. Real good dude, big guy, but just doesn't play physical enough. Good on face-offs. I think the Bruins fans will really learn to like him. Not afraid to drop the gloves, but he needs to build more consistency into his game, which is why the Sens felt that he was expendable. At the same time, they have some up-and-coming players that they felt might be able to seize that role, and they brought in some competition for them through free agency as well. And the Bruins also got back their own first-round pick, which was traded multiple times, ended up in Ottawa, and here we are. So obviously, Korpisalo with salary retained, Kastelik in a first for Ullmark is a great trade. I'll give Staios a great grade on that one. We'll see if Korpisalo works out for the Bruins. If he does okay and doesn't drag them down, maybe it'll be an okay deal for the Bruins too. I mean, they get Dean Letourneau with that first round pick. Kastelik, I still think, is young enough that has potential. It might turn out okay for Boston, but in the early stages, you always say that the team that gets the best player wins the deal. So for right now, we'll say advantage Senators. But of course, Ullmark has 1 year left on his contract, and so far has not inked an extension. But based on everything we've heard from Ullmark himself, from the team, from Staios, there's no reason to panic here. I know fans of other fan bases, whether it be Toronto, Montreal, Detroit, all their rivals like to heckle them and say he's not staying because they've unfortunately had a trend of this lately. We don't know that. Ullmark seems like a pretty chill dude and was wanting to take some time, get to know the city first. Of course, he's a fellow Swede. Lots of Swedes have had great success in Ottawa. Daniel Alfredsson did play a role in helping him be kind of warming up to the idea of going to Ottawa. He did not have to waive his no trade to go there either, which was a contested topic. A lot of people said he did. He didn't. He himself said that Ottawa was not on his no trade, mainly because they had just signed Korpisalo long-term last year. He didn't think they'd be in the goalie market, so why block them? He blocked teams that he thought would be more likely to have a need for his services. So at the end of the day, that was a great trade for the Ottawa Senators, and by fixing their goaltending, even if he only stays the 1 year, the fact that they get out from that Korpisalo contract, it's still a big win. Ideally, though, he extends and stays. But the jury is out on that. They also traded Jacob Chychrun to the Washington Capitals in exchange for Nick Jensen and a third-round pick. As Steve Staios said, lots to like about Chychrun's game. It's hard to find a fit. They had too many left-shot defensemen that could do the same sort of things between Shabbat, Sanderson, Chychrun, and you could know that Chychrun, with the short-term deal, was going to be needing a big raise soon, that ultimately he was probably going to be the odd guy out. I know there was connections to Ottawa kind of being like home for him, having some family there. I think he liked it in the beginning. Over time, a lot of people said that he kind of, the hometown thing wore off, and it was like, I don't know if I want to be here or not. Understandable to some degree. He certainly was not used to being in the limelight because he came from Arizona. So certainly a whole different can of worms being in Canadian market. So they get a right shot defenseman in Jensen and a third round pick. Now, Jensen more defensive minded. He's the right shot, helps them balance things out. Jensen's probably not the perfect candidate that Sens fans had in mind when they knew that Chychrun was likely going to be dealt and that they would try to bring in another right shot D. I think the guy that Washington ended up getting after trading Jensen, Matt Roy, was more of a target, but that didn't work out. And I think at the same time, based on the contract he got in Washington, might have played a role in Ottawa maybe backing off and pursuance of him too. So at the end of the day, Chychrun, to be honest, was good offensively, not great defensively. For a guy who's as ripped and chiseled as he is, he does not play a physical game. So I don't know that they're really losing anything defensively. If anything, they're getting a lot better with Jensen being the better defensive part of this deal. And they have lots of offense from that back end too. So certainly, some options there. Matthew Joseph was also traded to St. Louis along with a third round pick for future consideration. So the same rumors that popped up last year with him being a cap casualty happens again this year. He got off to a great start last year. Then he completely fizzled out. So to me, he gets to play with his brother now. They both ended up with St. Louis this year, so at least that's a good news story. I know Joseph was a popular teammate, had lots of friends on the team, but ultimately it's hard to lose his speed. But again, you had him in so many different spots in the lineup. Sometimes he thrived, sometimes he didn't. The inconsistency is ultimately what kind of bit him here. They traded Igor Sokolov to Utah for Jan Jenik. Sokolov wanted a fresh start. The organization didn't see him being a great fit for the spots they had open, so they moved him to Utah for Jenik, who's a player that Staios knows from their days in junior. Staios ran the Hamilton Bulldogs in the OHL before making the jump to the NHL, worked for the Oilers for a while before coming to Ottawa. He knows Jenik personally. And knows what he's capable of. I think Jenik will rival for that fourth line center spot. Very physical player. They traded Robbie Harventi to the Oilers in exchange for Xavier Burgot and Jake Chason. They actually added a fourth round pick as well. It's Harventi and a fourth for Burgot and Chason. Again, Oilers, where Staios used to work. So he knows these players, specifically Xavier Burgot. Not that Harventi was a bad player by any means. I think he's battled a lot of injuries. I just think that with what they're looking at, it gives them a different type of prospect. And clearly Staios thought that Harventi might struggle to get into the lineup given, maybe too many similar type of players in the system. So Burgot goes to Ottawa, a player that he knows. So again, Jenik and Burgot come in as young players, not really established, but Staios has familiarity here. He also moves Kevin Mandolese, who, again, not that I didn't like the guy, they just had too many young goalies that needed a spot. They couldn't keep them all. So he goes along with a seventh round pick in 2026 to the Avalanche for a 2026 sixth round pick. So Mandolese gets an opportunity to go to an organization that didn't have quite the depth that the Sens did with that young goaltending tandem. They obviously have Sogard and Merilainen on top of Allmark and Forsberg. So it just makes sense that they gave him a chance. That was more of a favor to him to try to get him to find a place where he could go and actually get more playing time, at the very least at the AHL, which is what he'll likely be. He'll have a shot there to be number 3, which would be good for Mandolese. So at the end of the day, lots of busyness there with Ottawa, lots of trades. And, no big surprise. Staios has started to leave his mark on the team. Of course, in the draft, he takes Carter Yakimchuk with the first round selection. A lot of debate over if they took the right defenseman. Zeev Bouillum, Sam Dickinson, were very highly touted. Left shot guys. Yakimchuk, I think there's lots to like. Maybe there's a little bit more rawness to his game than those other guys, but he scored 30 goals in WHL. He's right shot. He's got big size. He's used to that physical game in the dub. I think he's going to be a great fit there as well. So of course, I know the Sens and Staios are quite happy with the pick. I know there's been some discussion around it, but at the same time, we won't really know how that works out for a bit. Signing wise, they started off with really, really busy, signing a lot of their restricted free agents, a lot of their younger players. They signed guys like Matthew Highmore, Angus Crookshank, Max Gannett, Nick Matenpalo, who came over from Europe last year. All get 1-year extensions, 2-way deals. I think guys like Crookshank and Gannett will rival for spots. I think Crookshank might be able to grab a fourth line spot or maybe be the 13th forward. Max Gannett, wouldn't be surprised if he gets a decent amount of NHL games this year as well. Then into free agency, they signed Noah Gregor, a 1-year deal at $850. Comes from Toronto, no problem there. Great skater, lots of speed. Not going to give you a lot of offense, but the speed and the forecheck and just the smart play is kind of what you're looking for there. He'll have a chance to be on the fourth line. Again, cheap contract if it's not working out. Fully variable in the minors. They signed Michael Amadio, who had a previous stint with the Sens briefly before, but it comes back after a couple of years in Vegas where his game is taking huge leaps forward. Gets a 3-year contract at $2.6 million. He's likely going to be a good staple in that third line for Ottawa now. Like I said, he's learned a lot, developed a lot during his time in Vegas, and is certainly a completely much stronger player now than he was a few years ago when he was there that brief stint before. So $2.6 million, again, good contract for what he brings. They bring in David Perron, some more experience from Detroit. He gets a 2-year deal at $4 million. Essentially, he'll have a similar role that Vladimir Tarasenko had last year. Tarasenko, of course, was traded to Florida at the deadline. He's now in Detroit, so him and Perron kind of swap places, except he was more expensive in Detroit. To be honest, with what Perron can give you and what Tarasenko can give you, similar age players at this point. I'd probably take the Perron contract. It's $750,000 less, so we'll see how that works out. They signed Adam Gaudette, 1-year league minimum, 2-way deal. Is one of the top players in the American Hockey League this year. So again, he can be a depth option to help the Belleville team, and he can be a guy with a decent amount of experience to be called up. So good depth option there. Of course, they finally come to terms with Shane Pinto, an internal signing there, 2-year contract at $375. That's a great deal. There was hopes they could come to grips and get a 5-6 year contract in place. They couldn't agree on the money for that, so they settle on this shorter term deal. But for what Pinto can give you, and he's only going to continue to get better, that's a phenomenal contract. They did get Jan Jenik signed after acquiring him from Utah, 1-year, 2-way deal, league minimum. Matt Sogard gets a 2-year contract as well. It's a 1-way deal in the second year. So certainly with Anton Forsberg entering the final year of his contract to be the backup goalie this year, the expectation and hope is that Sogard will continue to develop and be NHL ready for next year. So obviously that's a lot of signings. So they bring in basically 3 or 4 key players from outside the organization via free agency. And then, of course, they get some internal signings down as well. So you're looking at a forward group now. Your top 6. To me, they probably moved Josh Norris to the wing. So your top 6 is probably Stützle, Tkachuk, Giroux, Pinto, Norris, Batherson. It may not be they can move those players around a little bit. And they've done that numerous times. Those guys all have different levels of chemistry with each other, but that could be a pretty good top 6 to me. Pinto's top 6 ready. Norris to me is, has head to shoulder issues. I honestly think he's the obvious choice to go to the wing, because then you have Ridley Gregg, who can now play your 3C spot with David Perron, Michael Amadio. I really like that for a third line, and you have lots of options for the fourth line, whether it be newly signed Noah Gregor. You've got Jan Jenik, who you acquired. You got Crookshank and Ostapchuk internally. You still got Zach McEwen on games that you want that in more of an enforcer type role. So you've really got about 5 or 6 really options there. Adam Gaudette can rival for that spot at times too. So, there's lots of depth options. They can go with different looks in that fourth line depending on how they feel after training camp. Of course, on the blue line, you've got a more balanced top four with Sanderson, Zub, Shabbat, Jensen, or they can flip-flop the righties either way. That's going to be your top four guys for sure. Your bottom pair is probably going to be Jacob Bernard-Docker, maybe Tyler Clevin, maybe Gannett rivals. You got Hamonic is going to likely be the number 7 guy. So again, the third pair is what concerns me. There's going to be a lot of youth if Hamonic's not there, but when Hamonic's played, he hasn't been good. So the trust factor is not really there with Hamonic right now. So I don't know how this is going to go. If there's a concern for me right now, it's the third pair of the blue line. And of course, between the pipes, you got Ullmark in Forsberg. So ultimately, I know Sens fans have been calling Stay Steady Steve on social media. So to me, he's done a lot of good things. He's fixed the goaltending. Ultimately, Ullmark should be a major upgrade. And the stats showed last year that in games that they would have had that they lost, if they would have had average goaltending, they would have cut down the goals against drastically. I believe. I know I was looking at the analytics, and if they would have had average goaltending for the season, they would have been a playoff team. They would have edged out that last wild card spot. It was that much of a difference. That was by far their Achilles heel. So, not to say that Ullmark's going to come in as a savior, because the team still has to play good in front of them. But when you have a goalie who can bail you out, even if it's only once in a while, when you make a mistake, that goes a long way. Whereas before, if anybody made a mistake and it resulted in a chance, it was going in. There was never any goaltender bailing you out. Whereas you could say with Boston, Swayman and Ullmark did that a lot, and was a big part of why they were as good as they were. Of course, the D core is balanced better now, with lefty righty, more a combination of offense defense. The third pair still gives me a little bit of concern, but I like the structure a bit better. And then, like I said, there's lots of depth for the fourth line. I really like their top 9. The fourth line, I guess you could say I have some concerns just because there's so many pieces. It's hard to say how it all fits together, what exactly the ideal fourth line is, and they're going to have to probably go through some options and see. At the end of the day, summarizing the in and out for the team over the course of the offseason, coming in, you've got Linus Ullmark, obviously big acquisition there between the pipes. You got Nick Jensen on the blue line. You've got, obviously, up front, David Perron, Michael Amadio, Noah Gregor, guys like Jenik and Gaudette. So you've got a whole different mix here. Going out, of course, they moved Jacob Chikrin, Jonas Korpisalo, Matthew Joseph, Dominic Kubalik, Boris Kachuk, Sokolov and Harventi are gone. Mark Kastelik, of course, was moved to the Boston Bruins in the trade with Korpisalo. They did not qualify Eric Brandstrom. They moved Parker Kelly as well. So, at the same time, they got a lot of these guys like Kelly. Kelly and Brandstrom are both not qualified. Kastelik part of the trade, and then all these other guys. So they're really, if you look at it, that's a lot of guys out. They could have, they've moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 7, 8 pieces really. Counting some of these guys that were kind of, AHL players that had some playing time last year. It's quite a substantial change. So for my grade for Steady Steve Staios right now, I'm going to give him a B. The only reason it's not better is because Ullmark's not extended. If Ullmark was extended, I probably would have given him a B+. But like I said, I personally don't see any reason right now to be concerned about that. Ullmark had every right to want to kind of get to know the city a little bit, get to know the team. There's expected to be plans announced. Hopefully in the next month or two, we're getting a new arena, so that'll be create a good buzz around this team as well. Let Allmark kind of get settled, go through training camp, and really, if this team should be able to take some steps forward. I know based on family lifestyle, it sounded like he was, thinking he was going to probably really like it there. I think there's a good chance he stays, to be completely honest. But even if he doesn't, they got to move. They moved on from Korpisalo. Forsberg's a free agent next year. At the very least, they give up a few assets for a clean slate. So to me, ideally he stays, but there's still not the end of the world positive upside if he goes. But the problem is, if he goes, you get the clean slate, you get the space. but now you got to track down somebody who can hopefully be as good. That's the challenging part, which is not easy at all. So we'll see. Overall, though, I like the work of the Senators. Are they going to be a playoff team next year? That's really hard to say, but I do think they're going to probably be better positioned for it now than they have been the past couple of years. So, it's really been about 2 years since people have been saying they should make it. I think third time's the charm. Defensively, they're better. Goaltending should be better. They've been offensively really strong in the last couple of years anyways. In all honesty, this is the year. To me, this is a major season for them. If they don't make it, we will see more substantial change next year. So I'm giving Steos a B. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.